Just moments ago, a carefully shaped message emerged from within royal circles, and while it did not arrive with flashing headlines or dramatic announcements, its emotional weight was felt immediately around the world. According to royal observers and longtime commentators, Princess Anne and Prince William stepped forward not to confirm rumors as facts, but to acknowledge something far more serious, that the situation surrounding Princess Kate's health has reached a point where silence alone is no longer enough. For weeks, the public had been told very little, and what little was shared was framed in calm and reassuring language. A routine medical procedure, a period of recovery, request for privacy. These words were meant to settle concern, and for a short time, they did. But as days passed and then weeks, the absence of Princess Catherine became harder to ignore. She was no longer seen at public events, no photographs were released, and no casual updates followed. For a royal family known for controlled visibility, this level of stillness felt unusual. Gradually, questions began to form, not from gossip, but from genuine concern. Where was Kate, and why did everything feel different this time? Royal watchers noticed subtle changes. Prince William appeared less frequently in public, and when he did, his expressions seemed heavier. Engagements were quietly removed from schedules, and official explanations became shorter and less detailed. This silence, while intended to protect privacy, created a growing sense of uncertainty. Experts in royal history noted that when the palace chooses silence for too long, it often signals internal struggle. This does not mean tragedy is confirmed, but it does suggest complexity. Princess Anne's presence at this moment was especially meaningful. Known for her lifelong dedication to duty and her straightforward nature, she has rarely participated in emotionally framed public moments. Her involvement signaled to many that this was not routine. According to those familiar with royal behavior, when Anne steps forward, it is often because the matter carries deep personal importance. Observers noted her tone was steady but serious, controlled yet human. Prince William, standing beside her, appeared not as a distant royal figure but as a concerned husband and father. While no specific medical details were shared, the language used suggested that the path ahead remains uncertain. This uncertainty is what unsettled the public most. The monarchy is often seen as strong and unbreakable, but moments like this remind people that behind titles and traditions are real human beings. Social media reacted almost instantly. Messages of support, concern, and empathy appeared across platforms. Many expressed sadness, others confusion, and some frustration at the lack of clear information. Outside royal residences, small groups gathered quietly, not in protest, but in shared worry. Candles appeared, handwritten notes were placed near gates, and people stood in silence. This reaction did not come from confirmed tragedy, but from emotional connection. Princess Kate has long been seen as a symbol of warmth, stability, and quiet strength. Her absence left a noticeable gap. Commentators emphasized that what was acknowledged in this moment was not an ending, but a shift. A shift from reassurance to realism. From controlled messaging to emotional honesty. This does not mean the situation is hopeless, but it does mean it is serious enough that the family can no longer rely on tradition alone. By speaking together, Anne and William sent a message that this is a family matter first, and a royal matter second. That distinction matters deeply in a system built on image. It suggests that behind closed doors, difficult conversations are taking place, and choices are being weighed not just for public reaction, but for personal truth. The monarchy has survived many moments of uncertainty throughout history, but each one leaves a mark. This moment, still unfolding, has already changed the way many people view the balance between duty and humanity. And while answers remain limited, one thing is clear: the silence that once felt protective now feels heavy, and the public senses that something important is still ahead. To understand how this moment arrived, many royal analysts believe it is necessary to look back at the weeks leading up to this point, when absence slowly turned into anxiety. At first, Princess Catherine's withdrawal from public life followed a familiar pattern. The palace announced a medical procedure and asked for patience while she recovered. Such announcements are not uncommon, and historically, they are often followed by quiet reassurance and gradual reappearance. But this time, the pattern changed. Days passed without visual confirmation, and weeks followed without even brief updates. For a figure who had been consistently present for years, this sudden disappearance stood out. Royal photographers, who typically capture even the smallest movements of senior family members, acknowledged that there were no sightings. This absence was not dramatic on its own, but combined with continued silence, it created unease. Meanwhile, Prince William's public schedule began to shift. Events were postponed or cancelled with little explanation. When he did attend engagements, his demeanor appeared subdued. Commentators were careful not to overinterpret, but they noted that his usual ease was missing. Behind the scenes, according to insiders speaking cautiously, discussions within palace walls became more intense. There was a growing debate between maintaining privacy and addressing public concern. The monarchy has always valued control over information, believing that calm presentation prevents panic. However, in the age of instant communication, silence can sometimes cause the opposite effect. Rumors began circulating online, fueled not by confirmed facts, but by uncertainty. Hashtags trended, videos speculated, and theories spread quickly. Most were unverified, and many were inaccurate, but they reflected a public craving for clarity. Princess Anne's reported involvement during this period drew attention. Though rarely associated with emotional narratives, she has long been respected for her honesty and strong sense of responsibility. Observers suggested that her quiet visits and private conversations carried weight, not because of dramatic actions, but because of what her presence symbolized. When someone known for discipline appears concerned, others take notice. Royal staff reportedly sensed a shift in tone. Conversations became more careful, movements more deliberate. The palace, known for smooth operation, felt tense. Analysts believed this tension came from conflicting priorities. On one side was the desire to protect Catherine's dignity and privacy during a vulnerable time. On the other was the reality that prolonged silence was beginning to harm public trust. Prince William, caught between these pressures, faced a deeply personal struggle. Trained from childhood to uphold the crown, he was also a husband watching his partner face a difficult and private challenge. According to commentators, this conflict was visible in his actions. He reduced public appearances, stayed close to home, and avoided unnecessary exposure. This behavior, while understandable, further fueled concern. The absence of reassurance allowed imagination to fill the gap. Experts in communication note that when official voices retreat, unofficial ones grow louder. This is what happened online, where speculation reached extreme levels. Responsible journalists urged caution, reminding audiences that not knowing does not equal disaster. Still, the emotional tone had shifted. The palace eventually faced a choice: continue silence and risk losing control of the narrative, or acknowledge uncertainty and invite understanding. Princess Anne's role at this point is seen as critical. Her reputation allowed her to speak with authority without sensationalism. By standing beside William, she helped frame the moment not as a failure of control, but as an act of honesty. When the statement finally came, it did not confirm specific details, but it acknowledged concern. That acknowledgement alone changed the conversation. Instead of asking why the palace was silent, people began asking how the family was coping. This shift mattered. It transformed curiosity into compassion. It also reminded the public that even institutions built on strength must sometimes admit vulnerability. The timeline leading here was not marked by one dramatic event, but by a series of quiet choices. Each decision, made to protect, slowly added weight to the silence. When that silence became too heavy, it had to be addressed. This is not the end of the story, but it is a turning point. One where restraint met reality, and tradition made space for humanity. As the situation continues to unfold, many are now asking what this moment means not only for Princess Kate and her family, but for the monarchy itself. History shows that royal institutions are shaped as much by emotional moments as by political ones. When members of the royal family reveal vulnerability, it can either weaken public confidence or deepen emotional connection. In this case, the response suggests the latter. By allowing uncertainty to be acknowledged rather than denied, the family shifted the tone from authority to empathy. Princess Anne and Prince William did not present solutions or timelines. They did not offer guarantees. Instead, they shared the truth that not everything is clear, and that sometimes even the most powerful families must wait, hope, and endure. This honesty resonated deeply. Viewers and listeners described the moment as quiet but powerful. There was no spectacle, only sincerity. Analysts believe this approach may mark a subtle change in royal communication. In an era where transparency is valued, controlled silence can feel outdated. This does not mean private matters must be fully exposed, but it does suggest that acknowledging concern builds trust. Princess Kate's role in the public imagination is important here. She has long been associated with stability, warmth, and approachability. Her absence feels personal to many, even though they do not know her personally. This connection explains the emotional response. People are not reacting to confirmed tragedy, but to uncertainty surrounding someone they care about. Going forward, the palace faces a delicate balance. Too much information could invade privacy and create fear. Too little could reopen speculation. Experts suggest that small, measured updates, even without detail, could help maintain trust. Prince William's position is especially complex. As a future king, his actions are closely watched. As a husband, his priorities are human. His willingness to appear visibly concerned challenges the traditional image of emotional distance. Many see this as a strength, not a weakness. It reflects a modern monarchy, one that understands connection matters. Princess Anne's influence cannot be overlooked. Her involvement reinforces the seriousness of the moment while grounding it in responsibility. She represents continuity, experience, and moral clarity. Together, she and William symbolized unity across generations. The absence of dramatic claims was intentional. By avoiding specific medical language, they respected boundaries while still addressing concern. This choice suggests careful thought and mutual agreement within the family. The public now waits, not for shocking revelations, but for reassurance that honesty will continue. The story is no longer about rumors, but about how institutions respond to uncertainty. What comes next will shape public perception for years. If the palace continues with measured openness, it may strengthen its bond with the public. If it returns to silence without explanation, old questions may return. For now, compassion dominates the conversation. Messages of support continue to pour in, not because people know the outcome, but because they recognize the struggle. This moment reminds everyone that health challenges do not respect titles or traditions. They arrive quietly, change routines, and test resilience. Princess Kate's situation, whatever its details, has already prompted a wider reflection on privacy, transparency, and humanity. The monarchy, often seen as distant, has been drawn closer to the people through shared uncertainty. That connection may be the most important outcome of all. While the future remains unclear, one truth stands firm: when honesty replaces silence, understanding follows. And in moments like this, understanding matters more than certainty. The silence, the shock, and the human side of the crown. For months, the public watched and waited, confused by the absence of Princess Catherine from royal life. Official updates were brief, cautious, and carefully worded, offering little more than assurances that she was resting and recovering. Yet the silence itself began to speak louder than any statement. In modern times, when visibility is expected and connection is instant, the disappearance of such a central figure naturally raised concern. Royal watchers, journalists, and ordinary people alike sensed that something deeper was unfolding behind palace walls. When Princess Anne and Prince William finally addressed the situation, it did not feel like a formal announcement. It felt heavy, emotional, and deeply personal. Their words, carefully chosen yet clearly difficult to deliver, reflected the strain of carrying both private pain and public responsibility. Rather than focusing on medical details, they spoke of uncertainty, emotional toll, and the challenge of protecting children while navigating fear themselves. This approach changed the tone immediately. The story was no longer about royal schedules or appearances. It became about a family facing something frightening and unknown. The public response was immediate and intense, not because of sensational headlines, but because people recognized the universal emotions being expressed. Fear for a loved one, confusion about the future, and the helplessness that comes when answers are limited are feelings that cross all boundaries of status and tradition. Candles outside palace gates, messages of support online, and quiet moments of reflection showed that this was not about royalty alone. It was about a woman who had become familiar to millions, not as a symbol, but as a presence. At the same time, questions began to surface about how the palace handled information. Some wondered whether silence had been meant to protect Catherine, her children, or the institution itself. Others felt that the lack of openness created more anxiety than reassurance. This tension between privacy and transparency has always existed within the monarchy, but Catherine's situation brought it sharply into focus. The institution is built on control, planning, and stability, yet real life does not always follow scripts. As concern grew, so did conversations about how the royal family communicates in moments of crisis. Was silence still effective in an age where speculation fills every gap? Or did it risk distancing the very people whose trust the monarchy depends on? These questions lingered as the nation absorbed the emotional weight of what had been shared, sensing that this moment marked a shift, not only for Catherine and her family, but for how the monarchy would be seen moving forward. Inside the palace, duty, conflict, and a voice reclaimed. While the public processed the emotional impact of the announcement, the atmosphere inside the palace reportedly became tense and uncertain. When a senior royal steps back, even temporarily, it creates practical challenges. Charities, events, and responsibilities do not simply disappear. They must be managed, reassigned, or postponed. This is where emotion and institution often collide. Some advisors focused on continuity, believing that the crown must always appear steady, no matter the circumstances. Others felt that stepping too quickly into Catherine's space, even symbolically, risked appearing insensitive. According to royal commentators, this difference in perspective led to quiet disagreements behind closed doors. Prince William's position was described as firm and deeply personal. For him, Catherine was not a role to be filled, but a partner whose well-being came before all else. Any suggestion of planning for her long-term absence felt, in his eyes, like surrender. Princess Anne, known for her directness and loyalty, was widely seen as a stabilizing force during this time. Her focus was not on optics, but on respect. Catherine had not stepped away by choice. She was facing a serious personal challenge, and the institution needed to reflect that reality with restraint and dignity. Then came the moment that shifted everything again. Catherine herself chose to speak. Without build-up or ceremony, a video appeared that felt honest and unguarded. She did not use formal language or hide behind palace phrasing. Instead, she spoke calmly and directly, acknowledging the difficulty of the past months and the uncertainty ahead. She did not offer dramatic details or seek sympathy. What made the message powerful was its simplicity. She looked like someone who had been through something life-changing, and she did not try to conceal that truth. The impact was immediate. People responded not with shock, but with respect. Many felt that this was the first time the monarchy had allowed vulnerability to stand without being softened or reshaped. Catherine's choice to speak in her own voice did more than clarify her situation. It reset the conversation. Suddenly, speculation felt unnecessary. Her honesty filled the space that rumors had occupied. Inside the palace, this moment reportedly forced a change in approach. Communication strategies were adjusted. Planned responses were reconsidered. The focus shifted from control to compassion. Catherine had shown that strength did not require silence, and that openness could exist without sacrificing dignity. In doing so, she not only reassured the public, but also reminded the institution that humanity does not weaken leadership. It strengthens it. Healing, change, and a new relationship with the public. As time passed, updates about Catherine's health were shared carefully and responsibly, emphasizing progress without promising certainty. When cautious optimism entered the conversation, it was met with relief, but also maturity. The public had learned that recovery is rarely simple or final. Words like remission were understood not as endings, but as pauses, moments to breathe before continuing forward. Catherine herself did not rush back into public life. Her appearances, when they came, were quiet and meaningful rather than grand or symbolic. A visit to a charity. A moment with children. A single photograph that spoke more through expression than ceremony. These moments resonated deeply because they felt real. They reflected a woman adjusting to a new understanding of strength, one that included limits as well as resilience. Prince William, changed by the experience, was seen prioritizing family in ways that felt visible and intentional. Decisions were shaped around well-being rather than expectation. This shift did not go unnoticed. Many observers noted that the monarchy itself appeared to soften. Protocols evolved. Language became more empathetic. Updates felt less distant, more human. Catherine's experience seemed to accelerate a change that had been slowly approaching for years. The public no longer wanted perfection. They wanted truth, connection, and honesty. By allowing vulnerability to be seen, the royal family bridged a gap that tradition had long maintained. Princess Anne's steady presence, often behind the scenes, was widely credited with helping the family navigate this transition without fracture. Her insistence on respect and realism provided balance during a time of emotional strain. In the end, Catherine's journey became more than a personal story. It became a reflection of how institutions adapt when faced with human reality. The monarchy did not lose strength by acknowledging fragility. It gained relevance. People saw themselves not in crowns or palaces, but in uncertainty, courage, and recovery. Catherine did not redefine royalty through speeches or appearances alone. She did it by living openly through something difficult and allowing others to learn from it. Her legacy, shaped by this period, is not one of flawless image, but of honest endurance. And in a world that values authenticity more than ever, that may prove to be one of the most lasting changes of all. As the months moved forward and the intensity of crisis slowly eased, something subtle but important became clear to those watching closely. Catherine's experience had not only changed her personal life and her family's priorities, it had quietly reshaped how power itself was understood within the monarchy. For generations, royal strength had been measured through endurance, silence, and the ability to carry on without visible strain. The crown was expected to appear untouched by fear, illness, or doubt. Yet Catherine's journey challenged that idea in a way no speech or reform ever could. By allowing the public to witness uncertainty, recovery, and restraint, she introduced a different kind of authority, one rooted not in perfection but in honesty. This shift was reflected in how the palace communicated moving forward. Updates became more thoughtful and more human, carefully balancing privacy with reassurance. Gone were the vague phrases that once fueled speculation. In their place was a clearer acknowledgement that royals, despite their titles, experience life with the same unpredictability as everyone else. This approach did not weaken respect. Instead, it deepened it. People felt included rather than managed. They felt trusted rather than kept at a distance. Catherine herself remained careful about her role. She did not attempt to return to the pace she once maintained, and in doing so, she sent a quiet but powerful message. Value is not measured by constant visibility. Leadership does not require exhaustion. Her selective appearances carried more meaning than dozens of formal engagements ever could. Each moment was intentional, grounded, and free of unnecessary display. When she appeared with her children, the public saw not an image crafted for attention, but a family moving forward together. These moments resonated deeply because they reflected something universal. Healing is not dramatic. It is gradual, uneven, and deeply personal. Prince William's role during this period also evolved in ways that many found revealing. Once seen primarily through the lens of future responsibility, he was now viewed as a partner and protector first. His choices signaled a shift in priorities that echoed far beyond his own household. Duty remained important, but it no longer stood above well-being. This balance, once rarely acknowledged in royal life, became visible and respected. Observers noted that even King Charles appeared influenced by this change, showing greater openness to flexibility and emotional awareness within the institution. Princess Anne's influence continued to be felt quietly, reinforcing the importance of stability without rigidity. Her presence reminded the family that strength does not come from denial, but from facing reality directly. Together, these shifts marked the beginning of a new chapter, not announced with ceremony, but written through action. Catherine's experience also changed how the public understood the future of the monarchy. The next generation, represented by her children, was now seen through a more human lens. They were no longer just heirs in waiting, but children who had witnessed resilience, fear, and recovery up close. This perspective, many believe, will shape how they approach their roles in years to come. The relationship between the royal family and the public had been altered in a lasting way. Where distance once defined respect, connection now strengthened it. Catherine's legacy from this period is not defined by illness, but by the clarity it brought. She showed that transparency does not erase dignity. It enhances it. That acknowledging struggle does not diminish authority, but grounds it in truth. The monarchy, long resistant to change, adapted not because it was forced to, but because reality demanded it. In the end, Catherine did not transform the institution through intention alone. The change came as a result of living openly through something difficult and allowing that experience to be seen without disguise. Her story became a reminder that power does not always speak loudly. Sometimes it whispers through consistency, restraint, and courage. And as the palace continues to navigate an uncertain future, one lesson remains clear. The crown endures not because it hides humanity, but because it finally learned to embrace it. As time continued to move forward, it became clear that what had unfolded was not just a chapter in royal history, but a turning point whose effects would be felt for years to come. Catherine's journey left behind more than memories of uncertainty and recovery. It reshaped expectations, behaviors, and understanding on both sides of the palace gates. The public, once conditioned to accept distance and formality, now expected honesty and emotional awareness. This was not a demand for constant access or personal detail, but for sincerity. The monarchy, long practiced in controlling narratives, learned that trust could not be maintained through silence alone. Catherine's experience showed that when people are treated as capable of empathy rather than shielded from truth, they respond with patience and respect. This realization subtly influenced how future challenges were addressed. Statements became clearer. Absences were explained with care. The tone shifted from authority to reassurance. These changes did not erase tradition, but softened it, allowing it to breathe in a modern world. Catherine herself remained central to this evolution, not because she sought influence, but because her presence symbolized balance. When she did appear publicly, it was with intention rather than obligation. Each engagement reflected a careful consideration of health, meaning, and impact. She no longer carried the burden of representing perfection. Instead, she represented continuity through change. Many found this version of leadership more relatable than anything that came before. It reminded people that strength is not measured by how much one endures silently, but by how wisely one chooses to act. Prince William's role continued to reflect this shift. His approach to duty became more thoughtful, shaped by experience rather than expectation. He was no longer seen solely as an heir preparing for a future role, but as a man shaped by vulnerability, partnership, and responsibility to those closest to him. This human dimension strengthened public confidence rather than weakening it. The idea that future leadership would be guided by empathy, not just protocol, resonated deeply with a generation that values authenticity. Even the wider royal household adapted. Younger members observed these changes closely, learning that tradition could coexist with openness. Older advisors, once resistant, recognized that adaptation was not surrender, but survival. Princess Anne's steady influence remained a guiding force, ensuring that progress did not come at the cost of unity. Her role underscored an important truth: evolution is strongest when grounded in respect for both past and present. Beyond the palace, Catherine's story reached people in deeply personal ways. Those facing illness, uncertainty, or recovery saw their own struggles reflected in her restraint and honesty. She did not present herself as an example of triumph without pain. She acknowledged difficulty without fear. This balance made her journey meaningful beyond its royal context. It became a reminder that healing is not a straight line, and that returning to life does not mean returning to who you were before. It means carrying experience forward with awareness. As the monarchy looked ahead, it did so with a changed understanding of its role. It was no longer enough to symbolize stability. It had to practice it in human terms. Catherine's experience forced the institution to recognize that people do not connect with perfection. They connect with truth. This lesson reshaped how stories were told, how challenges were faced, and how silence was used. In the end, Catherine did not change the monarchy through policy or proclamation. She changed it by living honestly through something difficult and allowing the world to see the process without illusion. Her legacy from this period is not defined by illness, but by clarity. She reminded an ancient institution that relevance is earned through connection, not control. That dignity is strengthened, not weakened, by transparency. And that leadership, at its core, is about presence, not performance. As this chapter closes, the future remains uncertain, as it always has. But one thing is clear. The monarchy that moves forward is not the same one that stood before Catherine's silence was broken. It is more aware, more careful, and more human. And in a world that continues to change rapidly, that may be its greatest strength of all.